Oh my gosh, we have faces.
We do. Now people can guess who's who. But so welcome to our first episode of the year. This is our episode covering our top three movies from 2024, as well as the Oscars that just happened this week. And this is Alex from Los Angeles.
And this is Karan from Los Angeles as well. Welcome to Movies That Shaped Us. We are two longtime friends who grew up on opposite ends of the globe with very different backgrounds, but were both shaped and are still being shaped by the movies we see and love. In each episode, if you're new to the channel, we cover a filmmaker who shaped our love of movies and we explore their top three movies and review them. Obviously, this is a different episode. So, Alex, what are we doing today? You teased it in the beginning, but
Yeah.
let's go deeper.
Yeah, this is an episode we do every year coming back from our break slash sabbatical, or whatever you want to call it. We will cover the Oscars and our thoughts on the Oscars, about what do we thought about the show, what do we think about the winners and the different things that went on. Both of us are huge Oscars fans. And then we will finally reveal to our listeners what our top three movies were of 2024. So we already did our episode at the end of the last year where we covered the movies that shaped our year and represented our year,
Mm-hmm.
whether they were from 2004 or not. And now we're finally getting to what people might have been waiting for, the movies that we think are the best, and we can compare them to what the Academy just decided upon on Sunday this week. So yeah, this
Yeah,
is a
no.
big one. I'm excited about this.
Me too, like not that this is all about the Oscars, but if you are in love with movies and spend this much time talking and thinking about movies, the Oscars are automatically important, whether you like them or not, whether you agree with them or not, they're important. And I certainly I'm a big Oscar nerd, so I love this stuff for all its oddities and craziness. I do love it. So with that, what did you think of the show?
Yeah, I think overall the show was good. I thought Conan O'Brien, who is someone who I'm actually not a big fan of, not that I don't like him, but I was not as obsessed with him as like all my friends growing up were like Conan's the best before,
Mm,
when he was on the Late Late Show and then he was on the Tonight Show briefly and then he had a show on TBS and they would kind of be following Conan because he's like their comedy god. I just never really vibed with him, I guess. So when he
yeah.
was announced as host, it was kind of like, okay, I don't know, it could go either way because it's usually not my brand of humor, and his personality isn't something I tend to connect to, but I thought I actually did a great job. He kept the show moving. He had sort of a positive energy to him. He was kind of zippy and didn't feel like he was nervous or under pressure. So I think he was great just as a host. And also too, I think his jokes landed. I really
Yeah.
can't think of a joke that really bombed either in the room or in the broadcast. So I think the writers and his team did a fantastic job just on the vibe of the show. What about you? What'd you think of Conan?
I thought he was great. Like, I'm not, a huge fan of his only because I didn't grow up in this country watching a lot of late night. And by the time I was watching, his shows were sort of, off the telecast and what have you. So Kimmel and those guys have been sort of more in my Rolodex of watching late night shows. But
Mhm.
I am very familiar with his sort of like silly but sincere kind of sense of humor, which I really like. And I think my sense of humor can be like that too, a little bit sometimes. So I was very happy when they announced that he's going to host. But you still never know how it's going to pan out. I've seen him host the Emmys just on YouTube, and I thought those shows were really good. But I think he just nailed it in my mind. Like, not only did his jokes land, I think his presence is so comforting and calming. He looks good in a suit. Like you could sort of feel like he was working the room really well. But the biggest prop that I have to give him is sort of the tone handling, right? Like
Mhm.
this Oscar was happening after the fires. There's a lot of instability in the world, all of that. And how do you kind of thread that needle and make it silly at the same time poignant and meaningful, but also celebrate the artist and the art without making it sound, too self-important. And that's just so hard to do. And he did all of that in that one monologue, which I thought was great. And right from the beginning, when he crawled out of Demi Moore's carcass, I was like, okay, we are off to a good start. I think we're in good hands. So yeah, I thought he did great. What else did you like or not like about the show?
I felt like it moved pretty quickly,
Yeah, I
even though it was
agree.
a long show, but it didn't feel long. I mean, maybe the fact that it started, at least on the Pacific Coast here at 4 o'clock, which
Right.
I was like, that can't be right. I was going to a party, an Oscar party. I was like, well, I can show up there at like 4:30. I don't need to see like the red carpet per se because I had a lot of stuff going on. But then it was actually 4 o'clock is when it started, which is like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh. And then I was remembering last year, maybe it started that early. So the show lasted kind of long, but it felt sort of short because it started early, at least for us on the Pacific Coast. I liked the again the one thing that I didn't, just the one more note on Conan that I didn't really think worked is that musical number he did right in the beginning about the show's too long. Like I get the joke, but it was actually like, yeah, actually you've been up here for like 20 minutes. Can we just kind of start moving a little bit? That was really the only part I thought weird a little thin for me with him. But then putting him aside, I thought the presenters were great. They had a really good mix of different people. I loved how they had the anecdotes of for the supporting actors where they would talk about why they like working with these people. I thought that was really cool, and I loved as well. Speaking of like talking about the art, the montage of the different best pictures. How not only did they show clips, but they had the filmmakers talking about the various things they were trying
Hmm.
to do with the films, and I really liked that a lot. There was a good blend of making it personal, but also honoring the art and the film. I liked both of those things.
Yeah, I agree. I think the pacing was great. I agree. Like at that time when Conan did his number, I was like, oh, this is kind of funny. Little did I know there was so many other musical numbers coming after that. So I was like,
Right.
oh, we could have cut that one. But it was still kind of cute and funny. And I like the sandworm from Dune sort of playing the piano and what have you. So it's okay. But yeah, I think, the Oscars have been getting a lot of flack for like you don't show the clips or you do the Fab Five thing or you do go too long on the speeches and what have you. And I liked they kind of did a little bit of all of that.
Hmm.
And I know I've read some complaints about that it felt inconsistent and why did the lead acting categories didn't have because who's going to talk about it? Carlos Sofia Gascon. Maybe they
Right.
avoided that. Who knows? But I don't know. I like the surprise of it. Like every category sort of felt a little bit fresh that, oh, are they going to do that? Are they going to do that? And so I think that was great. And in the Fab Five thing, it was great to bring people who actually worked with those artists, because
Hmm.
they had a personal relationship with them. And when they were looking at them, you sort of felt it. I'll still say for the average Oscar watcher who's not watched all these movies, even though to your point, I love the clips that were shown. They saved a lot of time instead of getting all the actors and whoever from that movie to present the movie. I like the clips. That's much better. It keeps the show moving. That said, when they didn't show clips in certain categories like supporting actor, supporting actress, I kind of missed that. Or when they
Hmm.
didn't show clips for the cinematography and costume design where they did the Fab Five thing, because you want to see the work. So I hope they can find a way to kind of gel that where it feels personal. You're sharing your personal relationship and whatever with the artist, but also actually showing the costume. Now, you could see the costumes in the back of every Fab
Right.
Five person, but if you've not watched these movies, you're not going to understand what are they celebrating, So, but overall, I thought the introductions and how the show moved was really great. The stage was amazing. I just kept marveling at how brilliant the stage was, how it moved, and the lighting, and I'm so glad it's not the club Oscars that were a few
Oh.
years ago so bad. Like this was so great. Like it felt like these people know how to put a show together. From right from the jump. Like it felt like a very staged, elegant, kind of elevated production. So I love that. I
Yeah.
guess we've not talked about one thing, which is the musical productions. What did you think about that?
Well, one note on the music and the stage
Yeah.
is I love the placement of the band in the
Oh
middle of
yeah.
the stage
So
was
great. I
beautiful.
love it.
That was beautiful.
So good.
So yeah, on the music performances, I was not so much of a fan of actually how they started the show on the Wizard of Oz song. Then they went to the Wiz and they sang the big song from Wicked. Not because that movie I thought was fine. I wasn't like the biggest Wicked fan, but it just felt so much like the Tonys to me of like we're doing some of these stage musical songs, and I'm sort of like it's one person on stage singing, then another person on stage singing. It's like it felt sort of slow and dead. And if you want a music performance, I love when they start with the music performance, but it's got to be like lively and sort of start the show up on a high note. And I felt that felt sort
Mm,
of flat to me in the beginning, though. Again, they did a great job. I think Ariana's dress was fantastic. You know, looked like a
yeah.
ruby slippers, like that was really cool. But I wasn't so plussed on the opening. What did you think about the opening?
I loved it. A, the songs are amazing. B, I just think that given the tonal balance of this ceremony, right, it just felt like the right tone to have these songs that are timeless but kind of poignant. They're not sort of big, rousing numbers. At the same time, people love him, and there's like a crescendo to define gravity, right? So it starts kind of slow, but then really goes up there. The stage with her in the rainbow,
That was cool.
iconic. I mean, that
Yeah.
image is going to stay, for the rest of time. So I thought they did a great job. And then secondly, just, from a pure show marketing standpoint, you have two big movies in the nominees, right? Dune and Wicked. So if you're not going to capitalize on that, like that to me would be silly. So I'm glad they opened with that to kind of draw interest and, market on all their channels for, the more populist people that come on, like the Wicked song is on, right? So
Hmm.
I thought that worked. What maybe was a bit of a question mark for me, and I'm curious to get your thoughts, is the whole Bond situation. I mean, I understand that they got the Governor's Award, Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson, so they brought that back. I get it. At the same time, they've done a Bond tribute now 3 times in the last 12 years, so it felt a little bit weird. For the, I kept thinking, oh, will they announce the new Bond? Like that would have been amazing if they did that. That didn't happen.
Yeah.
And for us industry insiders, whatever, it sort of felt like a memoriam to the
Yeah.
sale to Amazon, which the common movie lover doesn't really know or care about. So, or maybe they do, I don't know. So that's fine. But the biggest no-no was, if you're going to have songs, which I thought was staged very beautifully. Like I loved what they were wearing and how the light moved, etc. Except, where are the people who sang these songs? Who are these people? I mean, I know Doja Cat, but I don't know who the other two people are. And you know, I don't mean to offend anybody, but like these were not great singers, especially Doja Cat. Like she's not. I don't consider her as like a singer. And meanwhile, that song is so difficult. You need to have a real singer. And then Adele is alive. Shirley Bassey isn't. Why don't you get Adele to sing her song or get Billie Eilish to sing her song? So I don't know what happened there. I guess they're trying to kind of go with sort of more current, younger singers who the young people know of, but it sort of felt like, karaoke versions of these iconic songs. So I don't know. That said, I love a musical number. It was great to see Margaret Qualley dance. The stage was great. So, and these songs are great. So I'll take him anytime. It just felt odd, you know?
It was odd. It reminded me of the stuff they used to do a lot in the late 90s, where
Oh,
there'd be
yeah.
these like out of nowhere musical numbers, or there was that one year when they did interpretive dance for every Best Picture nominee.
Right.
Like this sort of like, what is this? But then at the same time, well, this is kind of the Oscars. So it made me this feeling of nostalgia of like,
True.
this is kind of dumb and sort of pointless, but that's kind of why sometimes we watch the show. And listeners on, or not listeners, I guess viewers who are watching us on video can see behind me the Bond poster. So I am a huge Bond fan,
Right.
as I mentioned also in this previous episodes where we've covered Bond movies. So I was like, great, a Bond thing, like I'm here for
I'll
it. Even though,
take
like,
it
again,
anytime.
I admit that it was sort of pointless, and if they could have cut fat from the show, losing that wouldn't have lost anything. But I don't know. I liked the stage production. I kind of got what they were doing with using these other singers, where it's like more tributes to these songs. But
Right.
it wasn't like the songs that won the Oscar, because those would have been the previous three Bond songs. But those songs are kind of downers, so you wanted to put in some, the like Live and Let Die in there. So I don't really know why they chose those songs. Is sort of what I was trying to think about. But the singers, I thought, did actually a good job for what they were
The
trying
other
to
two were
do.
fine. It's just Doja Cat that was not good.
I was distracted by the cool diamonds that she was in. That I
That
was kind
was
of like,
amazing.
okay,
She looked great, and the
yeah, yeah,
staging was
yeah,
incredible. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, for sure.
yeah. But
Um,
that was definitely. I don't know why they did this. They could have lost it. But again, I feel like with the Oscars, you need one thing that's kind of dumb. like this to be part of it. And again, they could have picked the worst franchise or at least songs. I loved all the songs, so it could have been a lot
Yeah,
worse. It's sort of how I was
I
thinking about it.
agree. I mean, what was worse was the Quincy Jones tribute, which,
Yeah.
I mean, we just did one for the Grammys. So how do you top that and what have you? And then also the song that they picked was not really a great song. I mean, it got some people on their feet, so it was rousing. So I get that, but I don't know. I feel like they could have done something cooler. Or Quincy Jones has so many great songs,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
they could have done a more fun medley as opposed to just have one song, which is basically one line repeated 20 times.
Yeah.
So that said, I don't know. Maybe I just become a softie in my dotage or whatever. But I get the intention, right? Like I just felt like in this whole ceremony, there's just a lot of love for cinema and movies and the
hmm
artist behind it.
hmm
And it sort of felt unapologetic to me. Like for the last so many years, they've been struggling that, oh, we're going to have the popular movie or the voted thing. Is this a telecast for normal people or for the movie lovers? And who is it for? This ceremony to me felt like it was for the movie lovers. And it felt unapologetic in that sense. So, you know, that's why I love the show because it sort of met that bar in my mind. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think the tone was struck really well in terms of the humor that they did was like they would make fun of the movies in more of like a self-deferential way as opposed
Right.
to a biting like, sarcastic and sardonic way, which sometimes, I mean, I love that type of humor, but in the Oscars, I feel like it's very hard to make that work. So I think Conan's tone was great. And the way that they were, again, having the people on stage talking about the people they worked with and the montage we mentioned, and even these silly Bond thing. It's like you could tell their heart was like, we love these songs and we love
Yeah,
this franchise, even if the execution's kind of silly, but that is, I think, shows the reverence. And I thought they did a great
exactly.
job, like you were saying, with that. And speaking of reverence, too, one of our, I mean, it might sound weird to say favorite parts, but a highlight, that even sounds weird too, is In Memoriam. I always like that. I think it's a great way to
Yeah.
pay respect to all the amazing talent, unfortunately, we've lost over the last year. And what did you think of how they handled that?
Overall, very good. I thought like starting with Gene Hackman because it was so recent and getting
Yeah.
Morgan Freeman to open that whole segment up, that was incredible, very moving. And the way the screen shows all the artists and the clips they chose, like all of that worked perfectly. My only note was the choice of the music. Like
Oh.
Requiem is such a downer, sort of dark sort of song that when it started, it was distracting.
Hmm.
And I don't know why they struggle with this every year in recent times. Either they have a very jubilant song or a distracting song or too dark, macabre sort of song. Just pick something, I don't know, melancholic or simple or soulful. It doesn't have to be a big production because the focus is really what you're watching on screen, thinking about these people. You just want the music to support that. So not I love the orchestra. They played all the songs, the nominated song, the scores really beautifully. This was not a high point in my mind.
No,
What did you think?
I actually liked the song.
Oh,
I thought
really?
it worked in that in years past, they've had someone singing that's always been distracting. Just
That's
like
distracting. I
someone else on
agree.
the stage. Lyrics, I also think are distracting. And then if you're trying to pick like a movie song, sometimes then I'm just kind of listening to that. If they're
Right. And
playing
it
some
doesn't
famous
apply
song.
to everybody else, right? Like
Right,
there's so many
right,
people.
right. And you can never go
Yeah.
wrong with Mozart. And yes, I mean, it's a requiem, so it is a somber song. And I didn't find it distracting just because I'm like, oh, great, it's Requiem. And then I can kind of like put that in the background because I've heard it so many times. So for me, actually, I'm like, oh, wow, this is actually kind of cool. They're using this piece of music as opposed to in years past, I think the main thing they mess up or get wrong with this segment is how they do the music. So I actually thought this was handled pretty well, and I
Mm,
also liked thought the clips they showed were good, showing the person in the clips, and they handled that really well. And I was actually kind of surprised that they had Hackman in the montage too, because I thought why they
right.
did the intro was going to be because they couldn't fit him in, and it clearly like they were going to end with James Earl Jones. But then they put in Hackman right there at the end, which I thought was extra powerful because I wasn't really expecting him. Okay, they're ending on James Earl Jones. That's great. Like he's a legend, and very sad that he's gone. And then to have Hackman come back, I was like, oh yeah, wow, we
Yeah.
just lost him in such a shocking, a shocking way that I still
Yeah.
just can't believe that all happened. Whatever happened happened.
Whatever
I don't
happened
really
is
know.
crazy. No, I think the ordering was great. Like it was great to then start with Maggie Smith
Yeah.
after Morgan Freeman. So they always bookend with like the two big ones. So
Hmm.
that was great. Just going back to what you were saying about the tone, the other thing that struck me was, to your point, it wasn't mean spirited.
Hmm.
You know, there were a few digs and jabs, but even those were not at the expense of the people, including Carlos Sofia Gascon. You know, like
Yeah.
even that dig was, it was delivered so deftly and so carefully that it felt tasteful because, you know, this is a celebration for the final product, all these people coming together, and then us audiences who, you know, watch these movies. So attacking somebody, I just is poor taste, you know, and I'm glad they didn't do that. And the same goes for the politics of it all too. Like it was, there were some moments, but the moment we get into speeches and such, I think where it came up, it felt like it belonged because these were people who dealt with those subject matters. They should obviously definitely talk about it because it's related to what they've worked on. But
Right.
other than that, like I don't really want to hear anything about that. You know, this is about the movies. It's about celebrating art, getting us together, and it was a refreshing break from all of that from, you know, recent years. Frankly, I'm bored of that, so I think that was very good too.
Yeah, I thought that tone was handled really well across the whole show.
Yeah,
One thing that just I don't know why this I think because you mentioned Carla, it kind of reminded me of the one thing I thought was kind of like the biggest negative on the production was it felt like somebody in the booth who was saying, okay, cut here, was not cutting to people in the audience enough. Like they'd make a
yeah,
comment about somebody who I know is there and I want to see them. Like, and they did a very bad job with deciding when to cut to different people that were there and not just like hang on Conan. Because like you want to
right,
see who's there. You want to see who's sitting next to who. Where are they in the thing? And like Conan's referencing different actors and different movies where you could easily, he mentions Dune. Okay, great. Let's cut to Denny and the people
right,
that are on Dune. Like that something was going on there, and I almost felt like maybe there was an error where someone was asleep at the wheel of saying, cut to camera three. What about camera four? You know, imagine someone in the booth being like, maybe something happened and that guy or girl just like got stuck in the bathroom. I don't know, but that was like my biggest gripe with the whole show was I'm like, cut to so and so. I'm like yelling at this people. Why don't you cut to, why don't you cut to them when they're doing this? So it was
right,
actually nice. They did cut to Carla during that one bit when he was like making fun of her in a way that I was glad that they mentioned the controversy
right.
and
Just
they
get it
did
out
it.
of the way.
Yeah, and they did it in a way that was I thought yeah, respect was really the wrong word because she does deserve to get chided in the way that her horrible tweets and all that kind of thing. But hey, she showed up, so she can kind of take it a little bit, I guess.
Yeah.
But that was the one time I'm like, hey, cool, they cut to her at least. But like, why weren't they cutting to other people? I don't. Did
They
you notice
weren't
that,
doing
or
much of that.
was
Yeah,
that
I don't
just
know
me?
what happened. I mean, it's funny you say that because that's my biggest dig on the whole thing is that the cutting and the crowd work, but really the star power from these shows just needs to be higher. And I
Yeah.
think part of it is that we just have not minted new movie stars except for Timothy Chalamet, who's there. But the class in between after your Brads and Julias and Clooney's, like, where is that class? It doesn't exist.
Right.
And Brad and whoever there, I don't know where they are. So I don't know. They need to put something in the contract of these kind of A-list superstars that you have to be there. This is like Hollywood's big night, it's Hollywood's prom. You got to be there and
Hmm.
have them seated. Like I miss seeing Denzel, Meryl,
Yeah.
Jolie, all these people, you know. So without them, the show feels a little bit lackluster. And then on top of that, if you don't show where people are, or I don't know, don't show the crowd work that people are engaging with each other, because that's honestly that's what we all tune in to watch, right? You want to
Yeah.
see how these people are reacting and engaging with each other. There wasn't much of that,
Hmm.
even though they were famous people. I'm glad they had some of the presenters like Halle Berry and Penelope Cruz and Goldie
Yeah.
Hawn. Like these are big stars. Meg Ryan, Billy Crystal. So great to see them. But I don't know, somehow you didn't see them in the audience before or after, and you want that. Not just it felt like they just came to present and then disappeared.
Well, they probably
Or
did.
maybe they did,
They probably did.
It probably was like, I don't want to be here.
Yeah, but no, you're definitely right, and we've mentioned this on our previous two episodes too, of
Yeah,
this being a thing where the wattage is not there. And I think you can blame the industry for, like you said, I think that gap is because we're not minting movie stars for about
right.
15 years because it was all focused on IP and superhero IP as opposed to movie star IP. But now we're back with some stars, which is great. We have new stars
Yeah,
coming up. But yeah, I think the Clooney's, the like you mentioned, all those folks they should be here. Like someone needs to call them up and be like, look, I don't care what you're doing, just show up. Just for it's 2 hours. It's in Hollywood. We'll pay for your hotels. We'll make sure you get a good shout out or whatever. You can sit in a nice seat. Like I mean, Jack Nicholson was like always there
yeah,
every year. I'd be like, oh, cool. Where's
exactly.
Jack sitting this year? Who's he sitting next to? And that was part of the fun. And I think that is for sure we've been missing that the last couple years. And at some point, someone's gonna crack that and somehow force the stars to come in
They
and
have
support
to.
this. But these other award shows, like the SAG Awards, like everyone is there. Like all the
Right.
stars are there, all the big star wattage there. And yeah, it's their guild, but can't they come to the Oscars too? Like this is the Hollywood's biggest night, right? Like where
Exactly.
are
What are you
they?
doing? I mean, the Odyssey filming can halt for like 2 days. It'll be okay, Chris Nolan. I know you have everybody over there, but like it can halt for 2 days.
Well, I'm not going to tell him to do hold. That is maybe the one thing I'm fine with losing stars if they're making Chris Nolan's next movie. That's the one
No,
excuse you get.
no.
If you're not casting that thing, you got to be
I
in that
want
audience.
Matt and Charlize Theron to be there,
No,
I
well,
want them.
okay, I want them to focus on the Odyssey, and maybe we'll get to that review when that movie comes out. But so let's move on to the last segment we're going to talk about here on
Yeah,
the awards is the speeches. I know you're a huge fan of Oscar speeches. Spend your Sunday afternoon just on YouTube watching old speeches. That is not a joke, audience. That is what he
it's
does,
true.
which is fine. That's cool. Everyone's got their thing. So, did any speeches this year? Will they make your rotation in years to come
Uh,
where you're looking at all the old speeches?
I was thinking about that this morning, and I don't know, part of it is because some of these or a lot of these award winners were so expected, and because I don't know, the whole award festival cottage industry has become so huge. And I guess I'm so entrenched in it too, because I'm constantly listening and watching and what have you, that there's something about the heft and the emotion of these speeches that doesn't meet the bar in as compared to what it used to be. Like people were really surprised and shocked, and now you already won a bajillion awards getting up to this point, so it feels a lot more rehearsed. That said, there were very good speeches across the board. I think I loved Kieran Culkin's speech. Like I was emotional. I was emotional to see him give a nod to Jeremy Strong, his
Right.
Succession brother. Like that was very sweet. The whole bit with his wife, though weird and awkward, still kind of sweet. It's very him, right? Like something that feels kind of in the moment, but still probably very prepared. Like he's such a genius of doing that. So I thought that was really great. Surprisingly, the speeches that moved me were not from the stars, but the more of the tech people, like the two Brutalist boys.
Yeah.
uh, I don't know what it was about their speeches. They were so nervous. They were kind of adorable in a way because this is not, you could tell that Daniel Bloomberg that he doesn't hang out with these people. Like, this is not his world. Like, he's in his cave composing beautiful music, hanging out with Brady Corbet, whatever. That really moved me. Like, these people who are unexpected to show up and deliver a really good, concise, emotional, but nervous speech. That's memorable. What about you? I guess we'll save the last ones for later.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like there weren't personally, like I don't think there were any of the major standout speeches in a positive way. I think there's a couple
No.
two moments that I think will be legendary in a negative way
Yeah.
that we'll get to. But yeah, I think those sort of the arts and crafts categories, the below the line categories, I thought were more interesting with the speeches, and they're also well timed. Like very few people until we got to the end got sort of the cane to get off,
Right.
which usually happens to the first the craftsmen that come up, and I always get kind of annoyed with that. It's like no, give this is like their only big moment, like let them have the
Right.
time. And I like how they gave them that time, or maybe they came in prepared to be like, okay, I only have like 45 seconds.
Right.
I gotta nail my speech. And of the bigger awards though, bigger speeches, and I know Sean Baker's given this speech before about we love the going to the theaters, but I think that
That was a
still is a
great
message
speech.
that needs to resonate. I
Right.
love that he was giving this message. That Anora was a film that was in theaters for a very long time without coming to VOD. I think it's now just coming to VOD. So
Right.
he was forcing that longer theatrical window, which I think is incredibly important. And I'm glad that someone is out there making a case for seeing movies in theaters. I think it is a very important political message, if you want to call it that, that needs to be continued to be said over and over
Right.
again to recapture the love of that. So I loved that, even though, again, I know he's given it before, but
No,
this is
but
the
it
biggest stage.
resonated more on this stage. It has to be said. And also I forgot about him. How can I? I mean, the big winner of the night,
Won
but
4 awards.
I
Yeah.
have to give him props because normally when this happens, that the same person keeps coming back up again and again, like the Daniels, you get sick of them by the end of it. There's something about Sean's charm. He just feels so, I don't know, grounded, excited to be there, but also he's not like a rollover Matt either. Like he stands tall on what he's done, has ideas and opinions, and then to kind of close it with this speech, but then also make it about, oh, my mom took me to theaters when I was young, and by the way, it's her birthday today. What a great
I love
capper,
that.
right, on a big message, but then you make it personal. Like, so good, so well done, and just like thankful to be there. It was a great moment for Tarantino to give him that award. I
Yep.
know he means a lot to him. So I think that was a great surprise. So that was great, I thought. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Speaking of surprises, I screamed when I saw Mick Jagger. I mean, I love their music. Rolling Stones are obviously epic, but I was not expecting him. And that's what I was, to go back to an earlier point, what I was thinking of, like, surprise us with some, out of the box people showing up on stage, like, especially from music or what have you, like people that even this group really bows down to. And I love that energy. Like when he showed up, everybody was on their feet. That was great.
Yeah, I love Mick, and that was awesome. Like he
So
just
great.
throw him into anything. Like he's so good at that. He looked awesome in his little suit with little scarf
So
and
great.
his line about Bob Dylan wanted to be here, but whatever, and
Yeah.
he's filling it. That was brilliant. Yeah, I loved Mick showing up. So
Yeah.
award speeches that were no bueno. What do you think? Who was the biggest
Oh
crash
my
failure
gosh.
of the night? For me, there's two that are kind of tied. What about you?
There are two in my mind too. One was, I want to say, one of the shorts. Uh, I forget where they're from, Cyprus or somewhere in the Middle East, where they're trying to bring their phone up between the guy and the girl. Who's gonna read what? Who's gonna read
Yes.
what? And then she starts reading, and the guy was like, "No, you're wrong," and then reads the exact same thing. And I'm like, "Oh, this is so bad. Why are you here? Go away, please."
Yeah, that was fun. Like so
Oh,
there's something going on there between them that this is clearly like something they're bringing baggage onto the stage. I thought
no,
that was the
yeah.
a very funny
And
moment.
not to stereotype, not a good look for the Middle East to be
Yeah.
doing this between men and women. I'll just stop there. So
Yeah.
that was bad. And then, of course, Mr. Adrian Brody. I mean, I feel so bad because he did a wonderful job. He's a very deserving winner. There's no movie without him. There's no Brutalist without him.
Right.
And I think he started really well, being very sincere about how this career in this business can be up and down and can all be taken away from you. And all that was very poignant till the point when he cut the orchestra off. And it's not that he cut them off, it was the way he did it was like, I've been here before, cut it. Like this symbol is sort of rude to me anyway, even in real life when someone does that to
Yeah, the
me
under
or
the chin
whoever.
thing. Yeah.
This is not great. And suddenly I was like, oh my gosh, all the goodwill that you've generated in this time to maybe erase, the past 20 years and what have you, it sort of peaked out from you again. So that this is not great.
Yeah, I'm with you on that was I think the
It's unfortunate.
yeah, it is unfortunate because not only I think his performance incredible and he's the one who deserved to win that award, and we'll talk more about winners in a sec. But yeah, he started off so strong, and I'm like, wow, this is a
Yeah.
really humbling thing of saying I can't, I won this Oscar 20 plus years ago. I thought my career was going to be big. It wasn't. He's struggled for a very long time, sort of in bit parts, and I think he's done great jobs in a lot of films. But
Right.
he
He's
won
a very
best
good actor.
yeah, he won best actor, and that did not give him a career. And now he sort of has a second chance, he's saying, and all that was great. But then he just kept rambling on, and he's trying to make like 14 different points. Just pick your one thing you want to say, say that and then, exit stage left. And I
Totally.
think him staying on there, the longest Oscar speech in history, right? That he set the Guinness record for the longest
Yeah,
speech. And it felt long when he was up there. And not
it
long
felt
like
long.
he has a lot to say. It's like you don't really have a lot to say. You're like, should have, oh, I have to say this and I have to like, dude, did you not rehearse this? Like, just cut it. And the amazing thing too is that when he walked up on stage, I don't know if you saw this, he like took out his Zin
Oh
and like
yeah,
threw it to his girlfriend to like catch. I'm like, that is not classy at all. Like, don't
not
you know, like you're
classy.
up for an award, take out the Zin pouch before you have to walk up there. That was
Just
just kind
put
of,
it in your pocket, whatever,
I know, instead of tossing it to your girlfriend, that was a little
It's so rude.
very weird and rude. It just started off on like, okay, what's going on here? Like he just didn't care. It was very sort of this cavalier, like, okay, well, I won Best Actor. Like, take my Zen. I'm gonna get up on stage and give my unrehearsed, it sounded like speech. So yeah, unfortunately, I think that will color my view of him, at least for the short term, until is in the next Wes Anderson movie, probably. I'm like, oh, you're funny
Right.
and it's fine. But yeah, that speech was not great. Then
No.
memorable and not a good way. And then the other one I would have add to that list too is the Amelia Perez song
Oh my
winners,
gosh.
where you
Yeah.
also could tell it was a duo, like a man and a woman, like the speech you referenced, where you could tell she was like, "We're gonna do the song bit," and he was like, "We're not doing the song bit. We're not doing it." And then she's doing it, and he's like, "I'm told you we should do it." Like you can tell they're bringing some baggage onto the stage too with that, where it was like, "Oh my!" And then I think they were they married, maybe husband and wife. So
Yeah, I
then
think they're a couple. Yeah.
as they're leaving, the guy is like 14 steps ahead of her. Like he's like, "I'm just freaking out of here. That was embarrassing," and she's back there like macking on Mick Jagger as like they're walking off stage. Like, okay, well, they're definitely gonna be talking about this on the ride home. Like that was so incredibly awkward.
Very
Those
awkward.
that was a highlight of a low light highlight for me for sure.
And then Jaco Dior is sort of standing behind them. He's like,
Oh
okay, what am I supposed to do? What's going on?
yeah,
It was very odd. It was very odd.
it really was odd. Okay, so speeches were winners. So let's talk about the winners for a little bit. What did you think about who won? I mean, Nora kind of sweeped. Not a lot of surprises, I thought, but yeah, what were your sort of first reactions to the awards?
Yeah, it's sort of interesting, right? Like leading up to, I guess, a couple of weeks ago, this season was so up in the air. It could go any which way. All the prognosticators, talking about Conclave and this and that. But then Honora starts to kind of really solidify as we get closer and closer. So, yeah, none of it was a surprise as a result of that. You know, I'm not unhappy with any of the wins, and we'll share our thoughts on the year at large. It's sort of an interesting odd year, so considering that, I guess I'm not unhappy that Honora took home everything. I like the movie. I wouldn't say I'm the biggest fan of it, although a part of me feels like I need to rewatch it to maybe kind of re-examine it. But I'm still happy that the movie was loved and adored. I am very happy that Sean Baker won. I think that makes me happy. Now we will talk about what that means for the overall industry and what have you. That this small indie movie took home so many prizes, like that's a separate conversation. But
Hmm.
him winning so many awards and breaking this record of 4 awards, for a single movie ever, and tying with Walt for 4 awards in one night. That's amazing. I'm very happy for him. Excuse me. But yeah, other than that, supporting actor, supporting actress was sort of sewn up a long time ago. I guess the biggest surprise of the night, if there was one, was Mikey Madison winning, which also to me was not a surprise because I always felt that the substance is just too weird. And lately we've been seeing that the narrative can get you nominated, it can get you really far, but it doesn't necessarily promise you a win. And that's what happened here. They just fell in love with Honora, and that's that. So I was happy that I'm Still Here took home the Best International Feature Film Award. I'm very happy for Brazil that they got their victory. So yeah, overall, I'm happy with the wins. We'll get into our top three movies. Some of them won something, but a lot of them won nothing. So there's that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm of the same opinion. I wasn't mad at any. Usually there's one or
No,
two I'm like, that is a crime and someone should, answer for this. There was none of that at all this year. I also saw Nora. I liked Nora better than you, I think. I thought it
right.
was a great film. Not my favorite film of the year, not probably even my top five, but still
Same.
probably in my top 10, I would imagine. And I can see why the Academy kind of gravitated towards that film. And I'm not a Sean Baker fan in the sense of I've seen zero other of his other movies. Now I feel like I'm more interested to go back and watch
Yeah.
some of the other films that I've not seen. But I was happy to see this filmmaker who's been working for 20 plus years making these indie movies and has a very specific auteur sense of what he wants to put into the world, and finally kind of like getting recognized after all this time in a big way like this, I think is great when this kind
Yeah.
of happens versus like a all of a sudden out of the gate, a brand new filmmaker kind of anointed with something like Damien Chazelle or even like the Daniels. I felt was like, okay, who are these people? Is this really their time to kind of get something? And I think that also hurts careers too, where it's like you
Right.
kind of get success too early. Sean Baker's been in the trenches for a long time and has been getting critical acclaim for a long time too,
Right.
but this is obviously the ultimate one. So I think this will be a good step for his career. And I'm very excited to see what he will do next, especially as someone who's so passionate about the theatrical experience and protecting movies
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. So I'm happy to see him award in that way. And yeah, the Mikey thing was very surprising to me, honestly. Like, even
Ah,
though she had won the SAG, I believe, right?
no, she won BAFTA, which
BAFTA.
honestly is the
Okay.
true industry award. So when that happened, I was like, okay, I don't think Demi's gonna make it.
Yeah, and they've seemed to do this a lot over the last 10 years or so. Like, there's the old person who they could be anointing, and then they pass them over for somebody else. And I always am kind of like, oh, that's kind of sad because she's probably, I mean, hopefully she got a shot again to me. I mean, but I kind of doubt it. This is probably her one kind of crack at an award like this. I mean, with the huge success of The Substance, hopefully this helps her career, which she
Right.
definitely needs a resurgence. But I was definitely surprised by that, though. I mean, I loved Mikey, and I mean, Mikey was that movie. If
Right.
with another actress, that movie would not have worked. That character, there was so much that wasn't written on purpose. I think on the page, it was so much of her performance was subtle, ways she was interacting with people, facial expressions. I mean, it was an incredible performance in terms of what she
Right.
did with bringing Honora to the screen. So I think she definitely deserved it. I do sort of wonder, in kind of the flip of the Sean Baker thing, I mean, she's been working for a while in TV, but this was like her first main starring role. Is this gonna be a curse to her? I mean, I hope not. I think, I like her as an actress, but it's too early for her to kind of get this level of claim. But it was exciting to see
Yeah.
her win, just because again, I was such a fan of the film.
Yeah. I mean, if you loved Nora or even liked it, how could you not appreciate what she did? Because without
Oh
her,
yeah,
to your point, like there is no movie. Like she is
no,
a Nora, literally. Uh,
yeah,
so, but yeah, I'm happy for her. I think, yeah, I think she'll be fine. I think in some ways, because this is not like, burst on the scene Jennifer Lawrence kind of win. Like she's sort of been around, and I don't think she has the same kind of profile. Like this was not, the way the movie is, the character she's playing, it's a lot more understated as opposed to Jennifer Lawrence is in like Hunger Games and Silver Linings Playbook, and suddenly she's everywhere and she has an Oscar. Like that's very different. Same goes for Emma Stone as well. And by the way, she's doing great. She's sort of become this industry veteran at age whatever 32 or whatever she is, which is
yeah,
what am I doing with my life? This.
yeah, exactly.
So I think she'll be okay. But yeah, I feel bad for Demi for sure. I mean, yeah, I think she put the gold dress on. She sort of knew this is going to happen, and it didn't happen,
Yeah,
and that happens sometimes. And we've seen it go the other way too, right? Like the older veteran person has won, and the young ingenue hasn't. So but the big takeaway, as is always my takeaway, is that the best actress race is always the most exciting race. It's always a nail biter. You never know what's going to happen. And this year, maybe for the first time, or maybe in a long time, all the best actresses had their movies nominated for Best Picture,
right.
which doesn't happen. So overall, I thought that was great, right? Like these movies were being celebrated, watched by everybody. Each of these people not just led their movies on performance, but they were integral parts of the narrative, the lead up, all of it, right? Like as lead actors are often. So I thought that was really great. So yeah,
Exactly. No, I totally agree that they were their movies, each one of them.
yeah,
So that was great to see. So Yeah, any closing thoughts on this the 97th Oscars, or can we head into the rest of the episode?
Yeah, I think I had a great time, like it was a great show. And even though the year was an odd year, and we'll get into our thoughts about the year, like it was a good celebration of the year. And the show was very entertaining.
Yeah, I had similar thoughts. I think it was a good encapsulation of a year that was pretty mid overall,
Right,
and I think Anora is a good reflection of that. I still for something about it to me though it feels odd to like in 10 years we'll look back and it's like Anora is a Best Picture winner. Like something about what that film is to me feels a little bit of an odd duck in terms of the rest of the last 90 plus years of Best Picture winners. But maybe that'll change over time. Again, I did like the movie, but as a
right.
Best Picture movie, it just feels a little more like a Independent Spirit Award winner to me somehow. But again,
Yeah.
that was just a reflection over the year of
Yeah, maybe that's
2025.
a conversation to have for like a second, because I agree with that. Like, this is an indie movie, and not that indie movies shouldn't win, but sometimes indie movies really explode. Like everybody knows what those movies are, and frankly, Everything Everywhere All at Once was that, right?
Right, right.
Small movie that everybody knew about,
Hmm.
whether they loved it or not. But I don't think this movie penetrated the culture the way that one did. So it speaks to the broader trend of the awards and the industry, right? The award nominating body is very international. It's also a lot younger, which means that these people are really engaging with movies and the marketing behind them in a very different way as opposed to the traditional Academy voter. And then it speaks to, like you said, what this year was. There were no juggernauts. um, None of the big movies kind of really grabbed the culture the way Oppenheimer or Barbie did. Like Dune
Right.
and Wicked, I don't think they really did that. They did it well, but they didn't capture the culture. And then none of the kind of indie kind of mid movies penetrated the culture either. So if you look at it from that point of view, this is probably a good reflection. It's sort of somewhere in the middle. I do think, looking back at it, like the $15 million box office aside, it has elements of like a, New York Scorsese movie with like a rom-com like Annie Hall or whatever, or even the Clark Gable movie, It Happened One Night, like
Right,
only a
right.
few rom-coms that have won. So I think it might sort of stand the test of time in comparison with some of those movies, because it is kind of gritty. I mean, how many movies are set in the sex worker community? So there's that. But it is a rom com. It's very slapstick. It's very physical, but also poignant. So in that sense, I think it probably will stand the test of time, as opposed to, I don't know, Coda or many other winners
Nomadland.
that we've had, or
Yeah,
that
Nomadland.
exactly.
Ugh. But yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it will. I mean, the movie has the quality to it that I think will, as people go back to the film, maybe it won't be as prevalent 50 years from now. But when people watch it, they'll be like, oh, I can see why this won. This is a fun movie that also has something to say. That is
Yeah,
engaging. Like
exactly.
even though it was a little long, I think my one criticism on it, you maybe could shave off about 15 minutes from the
The middle
film,
part for
but
sure.
yeah, but like you're not bored. The entire thing
No,
just moves. It's very propulsive, and a lot of that has to do with Mikey's performance, but also just the character in the film. You just want to
right.
know what happens next. It turns into something different in the second act, and then something different in the third act, and I think that's just the brilliance of what this film is doing. So yeah.
Totally. And very effortless, right? I was thinking about cinematography and other kind of technical departments. Like it's not flashy, but it's really well done to the point that you almost don't see it, but
Mhm.
it's handling so many different tones and you're on the move, to your point. Like that's not easy to do. And so it's very well made, for sure. He's great.
Yeah. No, exactly. So now we're reaching the part of the episode where we talk about our favorite movies from 2024. So we just talked about the Oscars, and typically in our normal format for new listeners, we'd go over a new movie and talk about a particular, whether it's a director or an actor in that film, and how the three films that each of us kind of shaped our love and our appreciation for that talent. But this is a bonus episode, our Oscar episode. So instead, we're going to go back to the year that was 2024 and go over our top threes. Will they be the same as the Academy? Will any of our movies be Oscar nominated in Best Picture? We're about to find out. And why don't we start with you, Karan? And what was your number three movie of 2024?
Yeah, excited to get into that. Although I do want to say one thing that at least my top three are all based on movies that I'm excited to rewatch again. Because, like we've been hinting at, this was a mid interesting year in movies. The more I thought about it, my positive spin on that is that I think everybody tried. Like all these movies at in the nominations as well as across the board are all movies where people took some risks and not everything paid off. And I like to think about it that way, as opposed to that, oh, things were what they were, which is also true. So so yeah, that's kind of how I've been thinking about it, that I want to watch these movies again because they tried something, not all of it worked, but enough work for me to kind of go back into it. So with that in mind, my number three is A Complete Unknown. Quick log line. In 1961, an unknown 19-year-old Bob Dylan arrives in New York City with his guitar and forges relationships with musical icons on his meteoric rise, culminating in a groundbreaking performance that reverberates around the world. Directed by James Mangold, starring Timothy Chalamet, Edward Norton, Elle Fanning, Monica Barbaro. Um, so yeah, I went into this movie just very cold in terms of Bob Dylan, because I mean I of course know who Bob Dylan is, but I'm by no means a big fan or know much about his music. Not because I don't like it, I didn't grow up in with his music, so it's just
Ah.
not been part of my fabric. Of course, I know some songs that are incredible, but I've been familiar with the lore and the mystique of Bob Dylan. So that's all I knew. But I don't know, I was sort of blown away by how traditional yet non-traditional this music biopic is. I'm sort of bored of the music biopic phenomenon. I feel like we get one every few years, and I mean some are better than others, but the tropes are the same, right? Like meteoric rise and then things go down and what have you, and the artist is struggling with fame and power, all of that. Instead, this movie was not trying to psychoanalyze or anything about who he is and why he is. Instead, just showing him, showing his love for music, and letting other people react to that. And through all of that, beauty of music, the period detail, the performances, you kind of left with all these deep questions about art and what people want from it. How much do you give it to them? Should you be giving it to them? Is it selfish to not? Is it brave to resist that and just follow your own path to become a musician? How much of that is intentional versus how much of that is just your own arrogance? I feel like it deals with all of that, but doesn't hammer it super hard. I've read a lot of complaints about that. Oh, you walk away thinking he's still unknown. I think that's the point. So for those reasons, and just the music, the great performances, especially by Chalamet, who I think just captures something kind of unsaid, about who this person is. I have this on my top three, and I want to watch it again because a lot of the music was new to me. So I was kind of lost in the lyrics and the visuals. But now that I know what the songs are, I've been listening to them since I watched the movie. I want to go back and see it all over again and just be part of this Greenwich Village 60s kind of time period, which I love anyway. So yeah, what did you think about this movie?
Yeah, so I very familiar with Dylan's music. He's not one of my favorites, but I love his music. I mean, some of the best songs ever written, definitely one of the key musicians of the 20th century. My parents were big Dylan fans, especially my dad, so I'd heard a lot of the music growing up, and there's definitely, at least in my high school, sort of a phase where everyone, or a certain group of people, were like
Mm.
Dylan, sort of like Dylan people. They're obsessed with Dylan, and all they talk about is how great Dylan is, and they like learn how to play guitar, and they're playing Dylan in the hallways. So I was very familiar with him. I'd seen the Scorsese documentary, and then the famous one from the '60s that they made at the time. But I was not a Chalamet fan, as longtime listeners will know. So I had a lot of skepticism going into it. Another music biopic. Okay, we've seen this before. Mangold did Walk the Line, which we really liked. We actually covered in our previous episode. But do we really
Hmm.
need to go back and do something similar again with Bob Dylan? There had already been the Todd Haynes film, so I'm like, we kind of already did it. So I
Hmm.
went in with low expectations, I guess. And I have to say, it really exceeded them. I really enjoyed this film a lot. I thought it really worked. It wasn't what I expected, which was going to be
Right,
more of a by the numbers, cradle, or not really cradle to grave, but sort of trying to explain who Bob Dylan was, why was he like this, what was he really trying to do. And I think the movie does leave you with he is a complete unknown. You don't really know, and I think that's kind of the point. And I think that is
right,
also what I liked about Chalamet's performance, which was not really there. Like he wasn't trying to examine him. He was just trying to give like show Dylan and what how he responded to things and that he was this genius who couldn't really control and he just keep writing amazing songs. And then there was definitely an arc that I thought was really interesting about that he was going through too of starting out in this folk scene that was very political and everyone had a message and they were trying to do something important for the world. And Dylan was used that to then become famous. Not in like a transactional way per se. He just wasn't part of that crowd really, even though the crowd interpreted him. And I think the movie plays a lot around with, and we'll actually get to this in another movie I think we're going to cover, which is who owns the art, how much is the art,
mm-hmm.
what the artist is trying to do versus what people read into it. I think that's really the conflict of this film is this movement that thought you're one of us when he wasn't really. He just was liked their music and was doing it in the beginning in his career. But no, he wants to go off on another path. And that's why that
Right,
ending performance at the folk festival, which is obviously a very historic moment that I don't know if that was something you were aware of before.
no,
That moment where Dylan goes electric, and
right,
but that it meant more in the way that they were structuring this movie. It was Dylan went on his own path, and he wasn't going to be in the box anyone else wanted him to be in, which obviously burned a lot of bridges. And I think he was kind of a dick, but he was kind of a dick, or is kind of a dick too. And I didn't try to like sugarcoat him either or
no,
making him into a good person or a nice person. He just is an artist and one of the best we have. So I thought this
yeah.
movie was great in all these things that it handled.
I agree. And to that point of the genius, like we've seen all these movies about, the great man who's like very talented and trying to capture genius of like math equations on the glass board or what have you. But I think it's interesting the last couple of years, like we saw that in Oppenheimer as well, where you see his genius reflected in such interesting, cool visual ways, right? In this movie, all he wants to do is at all times go back to writing a song.
Right.
And even though such a literal, simple way of expressing that this is all what this person cares about, I think it's very effective. Like all the stuff might be happening. He could be reflecting that in a song or not, but all he wants to do is write these songs. And they couldn't be a clearer way to communicate genius. And everything else is sort of kind of in the way but also supporting the genius, but it's kind of in the way.
Right. No, exactly. And I think that as much as I know about, I mean, I'm not a Dylan scholar. I haven't read his
Right.
autobiography, but I've seen enough of the documentaries to know that I think this did a good job of reflecting that of like the things that he did, but not sort of adding to the mystique of Dylan by using historical facts and real things, but not like removing that enigma of who he is. Because that's sort of what makes Dylan Dylan. I mean, you look at
Right.
his lyrics and you like them, but you don't really know what he's trying to say. But then you have an interpretation of what he's trying to say because that's what you kind of bring to it. But is it really what he thinks? And does that matter? And I feel in a way that's sort of Shyamalan's performance in this. And then also the movie is sort of doing that in the same way.
Right.
They're not trying to explain him. They're not trying to unlock him. They're trying to show who this guy was and that he was this artist and that he really didn't want to be put in a box. I think that was really
Yeah.
the which makes him unknown. You don't really know what he's going to do. And his
Right.
career after this is so varied in terms of all the different genres he did and all the different types of music he did and all the different things he did. It wasn't just he's a folk guy, which in this movie
Yeah.
starts out as a folk singer and then turns into a pop star,
Yeah.
which I think is what he really wanted at the end of the day. He wanted to be a pop star. He didn't really care as much about the folk trappings as much as,
Yeah.
you
Or
know,
I don't even
Seeger
know if
did.
he knew what he wanted. He just wanted to write songs and
Hmm.
sing them. And then the path, I mean, again, I know even less about Dylan, but from the movie, it sort of feels like it was very organic. Like stuff just kept going. And this is why I think his interactions with all the people are very important. And what a great ensemble that
Yes.
James Mangold assembled, all the way from Edward Norton, who just feels so soulful and grounded, but at the same time, really bothered and maybe even jealous of this genius and trying to kind of wrap his head around real time. Great performance by him.
Oh yeah.
Elle Fanning, even though a composite character, but I think she does great with what she's given. I wish she had more to do, but I get it. But a big standout of the movie was Monica Barbara, who, I mean, I'd seen her in Top Gun Maverick. She was very good there, but that's not her movie. But this movie, with all the singing and just their relationship and the dynamic of sort of equals, and she's doing it the right way. She's a better singer. She's much more established. But to then see this young kid come from nowhere and kind of become more popular, and that sort of artistic tension between equals of similar age group is handled so well. And then him and Boyd Holbrook playing Johnny Cash, who also I thought was a very important relationship to kind of show, because they are true peers and they have nothing to gain or hurt or take from each other, because they're operating in different spheres, but
Right.
they have this mutual respect, and maybe one is the catalyst for the other, to go be who you want to be, at least how the movie shows it. So I don't know. I thought all the interactions with all these people were very delicately handled.
Oh, absolutely. And the other thing I want to call out, which you mentioned briefly, but I want to draw more attention is the music performances.
Oh,
The
yeah.
movie just lets them hang, and there's whole songs are
It's a
performed. And
musical.
yeah, it really is. And Timothy does a great job of, mimicking Dylan in these performances and playing, the guitar and everything like that. But the fact that they do let the songs speak in
Right.
long parts of the film, I thought just adds to the power of this movie. And also seeing it in a theater where you're hearing the great
Yeah.
sound and these Dylan
That's
performances, you're like,
great.
whoa, it feels like a concert, which is so cool and powerful too.
Yeah, it's so great. Last thing I'll say, I'm very happy that James Mangold got recognized, because this is not easy to pull off, I think. And he's sort of been branded as like a journeyman director, but I think to pull something like this off, it can go wrong or feel so stereotypical, like we've been talking, is so easy, and he didn't let that happen. So I was happy to see that.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad he got the Oscar noms for sure, and I think he pulled off something that was hard, especially coming back to a genre that he defined sort of the modern version of with
Yeah.
Walk the Line. Like he kind of set that tone, and then that got kind of run into the ground, parodied too many times. We got bored of it, so he comes back to the genre, and instead of doing the same thing he did, he takes a different spin on it. And I think just again does a great job. I definitely recommend people see this movie. Sounds like even if you love Dylan like me and know him a lot, or not as familiar like you, Karan, it
Yeah.
still works, which is great.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So what is your number three movie of 2024?
So my number three is a movie we already covered early this year. It is Deadpool and Wolverine. So this movie is directed by Sean Levy, starring Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman. The IMDb plot summary: Deadpool is offered a place in the Marvel Cinematic Universe by the Time Variance Authority, but instead recruits a variant of Wolverine to save the universe from extinction. So for me, why this is on my list at number three, it was a movie I probably anticipated the most this year, and it met my expectations, was as good as I was hoping it was, and was probably the best theatrical experience I had this year in
Mm.
terms of going back to a Friday night at the Chinese theater, IMAX. Tons of people in the audience, everyone really excited to be seeing Marvel movies in costumes and t-shirts, and the audience going crazy at the right jokes and clapping at the end. And it was capturing this spirit that I love of attending movies in theaters, but also like the Marvel movies, which I've been a huge fan of since the beginning. I'm a big comic book fan growing up, and I do like these movies. But yeah, the last couple of years, they've definitely since Endgame been in a cul-de-sac of mediocrity, to put it lightly. And I think I missed that experience of having people be excited for these movies, and because I enjoy that. And going into a theater, seeing all of that, and then having the movie deliver on the level that it does, especially going in, yes, I anticipated it, but I was also a little skeptical having brought back the Wolverine character, where I thought the ending, speaking of James Mangold, they ended so brilliantly with Logan. I mean, one of my favorite movies, such a poignant ending on a character I really loved that Hugh Jackman had played for over a decade. And like, why would they go back to that? Like, it was a perfect ending. Like, they're gonna ruin this performance and this poignant ending. I think they actually did a great job handling that. So, the movie was super fun, got me exactly what I wanted. That's why this had to be shockingly on my list. I mean, when I saw it at the time as our number one movie of the year so far. So two movies have gotten past it, but is definitely still in my top three. So any change in your thoughts? I remember back to the episode, you weren't really that plussed with it as much as I am. So have you seen it again? Probably not, but have you seen it again? And what are your thoughts on the film since you saw it, or since we last recorded?
Frankly, I've not thought about this movie at all. I think I I forgot about it right after we recorded the episode, but not everything has to be for me. I was very happy to see you enjoy it. And my only regret is I wish I'd seen this movie with you at the
Yeah,
Chinese theater. I think
yeah.
that would have been the right way to really enjoy it and take it all. But other than that, it ain't me, babe.
No, that is definitely fair. I know you're more of a I want to say even like fair weather fan of the Marvel movies. It's just you go to them when you do, but it's not, your main bread and butter. So,
No,
for me it is, and I've been disappointed over the last couple years. I
right.
thought this movie, was incredibly entertaining. It was the humor was right there as you'd expect from a Deadpool movie, but also incredible action sequences. They had two different fights with Deadpool versus Wolverine, which is what you want to see in a movie like this. They were handled
Hmm.
completely differently. One out on an open field, the other one in a Honda Odyssey where it's closed quarters. So they're doing interesting things with the action, not just some, forgettable, action set piece where they're not caring. And as I mentioned in the episode that we discussed too, like I laughed and I cried. I thought it was very
Right.
moved. Not only the messages of the movies, which is about, people who feel like the universe doesn't care about them. They feel dejected. Both these characters do. And that's sort of the arcs that both Wolverine and Wade Wilson, who's Deadpool, go through in this movie. So I was very touched by the emotional journeys that they're on, but then also the ending where they do the montage tribute to the X-Men films. And those movies are, shockingly, as I was watching this, really important to me and
Right.
when I was growing up. So I think they did a very good job of a send-off and an ending, which is sort of another theme of this movie too, that things have to end. And I think they handle that really
Yeah.
well. So I've saw it twice in the theater, seen it a couple times on VOD.
Oh,
I don't know if it's the
wow.
movie I've seen the most. It might have actually, no, of the new movies, this is the movie I saw the most of 2024 movies.
Wow.
This is definitely one now that I think about it.
Wow.
Um, so it
That's
works for me.
amazing. I mean, I have to give it and say more on a more serious note that, this was not a lazy superhero movie like we've been saying. And frankly, I haven't watched a lot of those, but they really came to it with a lot of intent. They did a great job in kind of delivering, taking chances, and then paying homage, like you said. So, it's definitely kind of back to form. I think my big thing, other than sort of superhero fatigue and such in general, is that the Deadpool sense of humor is just not my sense of humor at all. And not even him. I can't stand Ryan Reynolds either. I can stand him maybe to a point, and I'm, of course, I admire him for all of his accomplishments. Like it's kind of singular what he's been able to accomplish. So I definitely admire that. But I don't know. There's something sort of smarmy, and there's like a different tone and vibe that's just not my vibe. Although I will say the first Deadpool movie I quite enjoyed, but
Okay.
that was it. That I sort of ended it right after that.
So it can work. I mean, I think it's like the humor sensibilities of like a 14-year-old boy is sort of like that type
Yeah,
of humor, which, I have to admit, like I love that. I mean, that type of humor is my humor growing up.
right.
I've outgrown it a little bit, but I can definitely like go right back in. Like when seeing this, I'm like, yeah, I can still laugh at this stupid stuff. All the dick and fart jokes. Like I'm still right there for it, actually, even though at my age, and it still can work on me. But yeah, it's a great film. I'm sure most people have seen it at this point who have at least wanted to
Yep.
see it. It's one of the biggest hits of last year, which is just nice to see a jolt in the arm for Marvel, even though since then they haven't been so great. But I'm hoping that they'll kind of be back on track soon with the next movies they have coming out this year. So we'll see. Maybe a Marvel movie will make it onto our list, or my list at least, in 2025. If it makes it onto your list, I'll be very surprised. But you never
That
know.
would
Maybe
be,
maybe
yeah.
Fantastic Four will just click with you somehow. We'll have to listeners will have to find out this time next year. Wait 12 months. We'll see.
Who knows? Stranger things have happened.
Exactly, exactly. So those were our number threes. Why don't we move on to number two? Karan, what is your number two movie of 2024?
The hardest pivot of all time.
Okay. What do we
Uh,
got?
my number two is Nickel Boys, directed by Ramel Ross, starring Ethan Heresy, Brandon Wilson, and Anjanuela Taylor. Quick logline: based on the Pulitzer Prize winning novel by Colson Whitehead, Nickel Boys chronicles the powerful friendship between two young African American men navigating the harrowing trials of a reform school together in Florida. So I went to watch this movie with a lot of kind of podcast listening and learning about what this movie was and how
Mm.
it was sort of shot in, first person point of view, and how it's sort of a very kind of, meditative tree of life like experience, which I know Ramel Ross is a big, Terrence Malick devotee. So there's a lot of that. And I think I was very prepared to kind of experience something that felt different and jarring. And I also knew that either you're with it or you're not. And for whatever reason, from the very beginning, I was just with it. There's something about the POV, the colors, the texture, the aspect ratio, and something about pairing that experience of POV with very carefully and delicately placed humans that you see, specifically Anjou Taylor, who I think is just so amazing in this movie. This kind of center of warmth and comfort in this kind of crazy thing that's going on. I don't know. It worked on me. I obviously I understand the criticism of it because it's so unconventional. I don't think I fully got a lot of it. Like I had to read about the even the kind of the plot twist at the very end to like fully understand it. But like I said up front, I think if there was a movie to say that took really a swing, a big swing, I think it's this one. And I can't wait to watch it again now that I know sort of what happened. And I was glad to see someone do that, and also portray this experience, which is so harsh and so hard. And normally it's played in a way that it's almost like tragedy porn or what have you, where you're looking at all these horrible, horrendous, massacres happening, and then you watch it while you're eating popcorn, and then you leave and you think about it for a minute, and then you're back to your life. Versus there's something artful about not showing what was happening and letting you experience just the humanity and the hope and the day to day of these boys and what they valued in their lives. I think that had a much bigger impact. And I thought about them for days after the movie. So that's why this is on the list. I don't think it all fully hangs together. I think it's maybe too long, and I just missed some of the details, like I said, but I can't wait to watch it again. I know you weren't a fan of this movie, so I'm very curious to hear.
Yeah, so I saw this only because it was nominated for an Oscar. I definitely know I would not have seen it if it wasn't a Best Picture nominee because I try to see all the Best Picture nominees. Then I knew enough that there was this POV sort of approach, so I knew there was going to be a POV film, which this done been done before. In other films, I haven't seen them, but I know, like Hardcore Henry or whatever, the
Right,
action
right, right.
film or whatever.
And that's looked horrible.
Yeah, I did not see that. But yeah, I didn't it didn't work for me because I couldn't get attached to any of the character the main character. I guess there's sort of two main
Mm-hmm.
characters
Mm-hmm.
because the POV actually separated me from what was going on. Like typically, I guess
Mm-hmm.
if I saw the performance and the person, I could like understand who this person was and have empathy because I'm seeing them instead of seeing what they're seeing. Almost like it's detached me from the person instead of what it was supposed to do, which is you're in their shoes and you're feeling what they're feeling. It was kind of the opposite effect on me. And when there was the part of the film where it switches, where now it's POV of somebody else. At first, I was like, "Wait, what's going on?" I was very confused, and then I kind of got it. And then in the movie, it was hard for me to follow. And maybe I'm just stupid, but it was hard for me to follow like whose point of view it was. So I got lost throughout most of the movie. And then, like you mentioned too, the ending made what I was completely had no idea what was going on. And I went there with my friend and I was like, "Do you know what happened?" He's like, "I have no idea what happened." So we had to like Wikipedia and we're like, "Oh, that's this guy and that's what happened and this thing happened." And like, "Oh, okay, like I guess I get it, but like it's hard for me to feel the emotion because I couldn't understand what was going on." So for me, the approach, while admirable, just had the opposite effect on me,
Mm-hmm.
where I just couldn't connect to anything that was going on. I didn't really care about what was happening because it just felt like, yeah, like a video game cutscene or
Mm-hmm.
something where you're just sort of like watching somebody else. It's like, well, who is this person? What does he look like?
Yeah.
And actually, that one moment when there's that switch and you're seeing the main character for the first time, what he looks like is a little bit jarring. It's like, oh, that's the guy. That's what he looks like. Okay, maybe I can get to know him a little bit. And then they just keep switching back and forth. So
Right.
yeah, and then the present day. There's a sort of a sequence they intercut with the present day that just really confused me throughout the film. And then I get sort of what they did with the twist at the end, but I thought
Right.
that kind of took away from it. Yeah, I just did not. I know most people liked it, so I know I'm in, the
No, I
minority,
don't
but
think
it just
so. I
did
think
not
it's a
work for me.
pretty even split.
Okay.
Like a lot of people just didn't had similar criticism, and I totally see that, right? Like it is distancing, but I don't know. For me, that felt intentional in a way,
Hmm.
and kind of submerging yourself in whatever was going on. But then when the flip happens, somehow my brain, for good or bad, was able to connect. Okay, we've been living through this person's eyes, and it was sort of delightful to see them for the first time.
Mm.
I got off my seat a little bit. Oh wow, we've been watching you and your world this whole time. So, but yeah, I think the back and forth and all of that does get a bit confusing, and that's when I start to think a little bit about the form than actually the storytelling, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
something that you don't want. That said, though, I think this movie sets expectations of cutting back and forth or using other forms of art, be it the Sidney Poitier movie, scenes from that, or images and such. It's to me, it's very much like a museum piece than actually a movie. And I don't know, like I said up front, I'm glad that somebody's playing with this form, right? We are so
Hmm.
used to watching movies in one particular way. Who knows what that's going to look like, in 20 years from now? We're living in the world of AI, we're consuming content in bite size and all sorts of forms. So I get it, and not totally all comes together, but the fact that this exists, and despite its shortcomings or whatever you want to say, it moved me. That's why I give it pretty high marks. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean they took a swing, or he
Yeah,
took a swing, and
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
he came from documentary film, which I
Right.
think that also parts of that to me
It's definitely in it here.
was,
Yeah.
yeah, it was like, okay, like I kind of get what you're doing, and normally I kind of like that heavy-handed. We're gonna show an image that means like we're gonna cut to like some
Right.
like a book cover or like the KKK people walk like a newsreel thing that can work on me. Like Oliver Stone does that a lot, especially in some of his sort of
Mm,
like early '90s films. And I'm like, oh, this is great. And in this, I'm like, okay, I don't know, it just didn't. Maybe because I wasn't involved emotionally at all in the film because I was too stuck on that aesthetic choice of the POV. I'm like, okay, like I get what you're doing. It's kind of weird. I don't know.
yeah.
Maybe I don't know if I'd see this again. I'm not sure. I'm not like I wouldn't walk out if it was being shown in a room, but I don't think I'm gonna like go and search for this on like my Fire TV and be like, play Nickel Boys. Like
Yeah.
I think I did it. It's fine. I didn't hate it. I
Yeah.
just thought I couldn't connect with it, I guess, is the my main complaint.
No, I get it. And I already mentioned Taylor, but I'll just kind of underline her. Like, I think her presence in the movie
Hmm.
is critical, because if you don't have her as a living, breathing entire person emanating this energy that she is emanating, it's a bit of a respite and comfort for the boys, but also for you as the audience. But also, you need, to your point, like somebody who we can see in a more conventional movie going experience that kind of connects and ties all the different dots to
Hmm.
her and to the place and the space they're in. So I thought that she was amazing. In fact, there was some murmurs around like maybe she'll get a nomination, and after watching the movie I was like, oh yeah, she should have, but I think, to your point, I think a lot of people just didn't connect with the movie, so it's kind of amazing that it got two nominations. Yeah. All right, what is your number two?
So my number two movie is another repeat for longtime listeners. We'd already talked about this year, but I'm bringing it back. It is Conclave, or as I learned last week from some Italians, the Italians call it Conclave, which is
Oh
so cool. Yeah,
wow.
can you believe that's what it's cool. So the IMDb plot summary on this: when Cardinal Lawrence is tasked with leading one of the world's most secretive and ancient events, selecting a new pope, he finds himself at the center of a web of conspiracies and intrigue that could shake the foundations of the Catholic Church. This is directed by Edward Berger, starring Ray Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, and John Lithgow. So for me, this similar to the Deadpool, which I just found very entertaining. This movie also is just I think the most like flat out entertaining movie I saw last year. Like it's got mystery, it's got intrigue, it's got great acting, it's got the plot twist, it's got great score, great production design, just everything that you'd want in a movie that sort of ticks all the boxes for just anyone can enjoy this. And on its face, it's like okay, it's about a pope getting chosen, and you think it's like a boring, a
Right.
movie where people are in rooms and talking. They are in rooms and talking, but it is not boring. And I could recommend this
No.
to anyone. It's one of those movies where, like, my parents would like it. An old woman on a bus would like it. My younger cousins would like it. Like, I think it just really does tick all the boxes. So, this movie for me was a surprise at how entertaining it was, but then also did have a message. I think there are, like it was talked about in the previous coverage of this, I think there is a lot of really important things it says about politics, the political climate today, the different groups and how elections, especially in democratic elections, happen, and the different interest groups, and then the ending too, which we didn't get a chance to talk about in our original episode, so maybe we could discuss
Hmm.
that in a bit. But yeah, any other thoughts on Conclave since did this sit with you, or did you forget this much like Deadpool and Wolverine out of the
No.
theater?
Excuse me. This has definitely sat with me for all the reasons you talked about. Like it's a airport novel, pot boiler, but is mounted beautifully in every department, from performances to direction, the score, everything that you said. So it's definitely stayed with me. And it's a bummer that how these, acting races kind of solidify. But I do think Ray Fiennes has probably given, if not the best, but one of the top performances of his entire career. And that's
Yeah.
a high bar. I mean, this is a great actor. So, it's super enjoyable, super fun, not what you would think it would be. I think we're inching towards my issue with the movie is the ending.
Hmm.
I wish they just sort of ended right before the ending, and it would have just been this movie about fun intrigue with some political themes, and that's sort of that. To me, the ending and the way it's sort of slapped on, it's a bit of a hat on a hat. And sort of I can feel the seams of like, oh, they wanted to make this feel a little bit extra important or more, poignant or relevant or what have you. And it just doesn't work because the movie leading up to it has not been that. So that's my only critique of it. But other than that, I had a great time and I would totally watch it again.
Yeah, yeah. So I thought the ending actually was, while at first very jarring. Like you're like, oh my gosh, this is who the new pope is, who they select, but then who that pope is. I'm like, okay, wait, what? Like it doesn't match the tone of the rest of the movie, or maybe it does
Yeah.
because it's like a heightened version of some airport novel, like you said. You're like, oh, now it's getting really pulpy. But what
Yeah.
kind of saved it for me was what does kind of connect back to the message of the film, but it's really in how Ray Fiennes' character reacts to hearing this news, because the entire movie, his character has been trying to balance, okay, well, I'm not all about what the image is, for the church. We're not protecting that. We want the right person to be pope, the person who's going to be the best pope for the people and who really cares. And that's all that this pope is that. And they eliminated these other popes that you realize have character flaws that wouldn't be good for wouldn't really be good popes. They're in it either for their own power, like Stanley Tucci, or have too many skeletons in their closet, like the Pope from Africa, or probably my favorite secondary character, the vaping, like far right wing, like Italian guy. That guy was cool. I'm
He
like,
is great.
I don't agree with your politics at all, but like you just sitting there with the vape, just vaping it
It's
up in your
great.
carnal outfit. Like maybe I'd vote for you. I don't know. But like those folks had these they were not good people on the inside, and they weren't right for the role. And now we finally have someone who is like this perfect person, and maybe that's kind of a flaw. It's sort of a this perfect guy who kind of comes out of there. And then when Ray Fiennes realizes, oh, actually, like because of who this person is, the PR is going to be bad. Wait, do I actually care about the PR and what how the church looks versus what's right for the parishioners and the people who are the Catholics in the church? And that tension of really putting his own values to the test, because he's always like, oh, we have to only pick the perfect person, and the rest of the stuff doesn't really matter as much. Sort of the image, and now he has to
Hmm.
choose. Wait, the image might be not right, but this is really the best guy. Was I bullshitting myself this whole time and thinking that I have believe in these ideals of we should care about who the person is and it's the right person and forget all the rest of this stuff? And obviously, yeah, he ends up being okay with letting the Pope
Right.
become the Pope. But if that, I think, is is really this great test for this character after everything that he went through. It's like the final challenge that I think does fit back to the movie. Even though, yeah, the reveal, even though it wasn't as the book has a similar plot twist at the end that's even more extreme than what they
Oh,
did in the movie. So they
really?
actually dialed it back a little bit
Oh.
for the movie to make it less silly, probably is the right way to put
Oh.
it. So they did try to make it a little more grounded, even though it is kind of silly. We were trying to like talk around the spoiler here in case people want to still see Conclave, but which we do recommend you see. But yeah, that's sort of where I think the ending for me was like the perfect button on the message of the film and the test for Ray Fiennes' character.
Yeah, I buy that. I think that makes sense. Yeah, it's just that the tone of it and the movie is so in on that that it's sort of, I don't know, it cheapens that some for
Hmm.
some reason. But then the whole movie is that as well. So, what's my problem? I don't know.
No, I get it. It is something where it's like, am I supposed to laugh at this sort of? Like, it is this moment of like, it's so ridiculous, that you almost do want to be like, laugh at how silly it is. And
Yeah.
then it immediately has to get super serious again because that then it's like, well, what does Ray Fiennes do? I thought it walked that line, but I get why it almost when the scene was happening, I was like, is this gonna ruin the movie for me? Like, is this an ending that's just gonna totally like make this movie too silly? But then, by the time the movie ended, I was fine with it. And getting back to sort of Ray Fiennes' performance, I do think it was fantastic. I think this movie sort of is a type of movie like they don't make them like they used to kind
Right.
of thing where in the 90s I think this thing would have cleaned up at the Academy Awards, which I obviously it didn't, but this is more of a traditional, I think, like best picture winner or contender than most of the other movies that were nominated, and even Anora, which ended up winning. It's definitely the Academy's moved way past what they used to do, but I love what they used to do. I think this movie was great.
Yeah, it does go back to that. In fact, speaking of Gene Hackman, like it reminds me of The Firm or some of these
Yes,
movies from that time, which they don't used to make it this way, but I also don't know if this movie, given now that we know what it is, would even be nominated in old times because it lacks the seriousness, like a movie with this casing and this pedigree would get nominated if it were serious. This is
that's true.
not serious. So there's that.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
that's why it's a unique year, right? Like all these movies are swings in some
Mhm.
way. Like you don't expect this movie to be what it is at all, actually. I mean, there's so many people that I know who didn't watch the movie because they thought it would be some serious, Catholic drama. I'm like, no, please watch it. This is not that at all.
Right. I mean, like I said in the podcast episode that we recorded, that I'll put a link to below, just in case people haven't listened and want to listen to our more of our thoughts on Conclave. But I never would have seen this if it wasn't for the podcast and we're us covering Ray Fiennes that episode.
Mm,
The trailer was like, and I didn't like the director, so there's no way
mm,
I would have. I mean, obviously, once it's nominated for Best Picture, I would have gone in and
right.
then been a convert to Conclave. But yeah, it just was not registering for me. But I tell everyone, you gotta watch Conclave. You gotta watch Conclave. I'll still say it now. If anyone listening has not seen Conclave, go watch Conclave. It's great.
It's great. Oh, and we didn't mention Isabella Rossellini,
Yes, yes, that's right.
She's great in the movie.
Yeah, scene stealer, like one of those maybe just in one big scene, but big enough, and she does a job of enough that she's get that Oscar nom. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And
she was great.
I'm not a big fan of hers. I've said this on the show, but I was moved to see her in like a blue velvet dress at the Oscars
Yeah,
as an
yeah,
homage to Lynch. And I was like, oh, that's very sweet.
yeah,
And she and Laura Dern came together. They sat together throughout the entire, I think they were sitting together.
yeah,
That was
yeah.
sweet. Yeah.
No,
I like
that
that.
was a great tribute to David Lynch, which maybe they could have done more at the award show, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Yeah.
that was such a shock that
Yeah.
he's no longer with us. But
Yeah.
okay, so now we're at number one. So your number one movie of 2024 is also my number one movie of 2024. So why don't you kick this off and let's dig into it?
Oh, we are so predictable, aren't we? The Brutalist boys.
Yeah,
It's
exactly. I was gonna
just
say,
so
is it
sad.
Anora? Yeah.
I fought this so hard that now I'm going to put something else, but here we are. All right. So, The Brutalist, quick log line. When a visionary architect and his wife flee post war Europe in 1947 to rebuild their legacy and witness the birth of modern day United States, their lives are changed forever by a mysterious wealthy client. directed by Brady Corbet, starring Adrian Brody, Felicity Jones, Guy Pearce. Yeah, this is a big one. As we've been told, a momentous achievement.
That's right.
Uh, and it is, you know. Where to even start with this movie? I mean, I think in a year of swings, I think this is the biggest swing there is. Making a movie of this scale, this size, this length on an old format, a period drama with so many themes that we can get into, with an intermission, with a cast that is, yeah, there are names in it, but these are not. I mean, I guess Adrian Brody is sort of a movie star because I think everybody knows him, but I wouldn't
Yeah.
put him in the top
No.
brass.
No, he's no Brad Pitt.
So,
Yeah.
no, he's no Brad Pitt. And with a fairly young, mostly unknown director, it's, I mean, the list just keeps going, right? And this, none of this should work, and he is able to pull it off for the most part, you know. So yeah, it really is an epic momentous achievement, and it was one of those moments in the last year, and I guess any year, when you show up at the theater and after the, first few scenes, you see, the ship landing, the upside down shot, the Statue of Liberty, and Daniel Bloomberg's amazing score
Yeah.
blazing, and you're like, oh, this is why I love movies. This is why we show up to the theater, for this theatricality, this emotion, somebody who has something to say, whether you like it or not, but they have a POV. That's why we come, you know? So yeah, for all those reasons, this is a monumental achievement. It really is. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, same. I put it as number one
Yeah,
as well. I'm not familiar at all with the director, seen none of his other previous films.
same.
And this movie kind of came out of nowhere for me too. I wasn't tracking the development or the release of it. I just heard it got some good buzz and it was in 70 millimeter and 4 hours or close to 4 hours with an intermission. So I was like, okay, I'm all game for that kind of stuff. I love that sort of large attempt at a amazing, unique theatrical experience. So much like you, yeah, I went to the theater and like within the first 5 minutes, I'm like, okay, this is like exactly what I like in a movie like this. You know, taking big swings with giant themes, but an intimate story that is saying a lot of different stuff and great acting performances, but very bold direction, interesting production design and cinematography. And yeah, that's that whole opening shot where he's coming out of the ship and you don't really know what's going on. You hear all this dialogue and it's really dark, and then it just goes out and boom, upside down Statue of Liberty. Like I'm sold. Yeah, American Dream never existed. Exploitative, whatever. I'm right there. Like this is exactly what I want to see. And then the movie just goes off in very many different surprising directions of things you would never expect. So it's not like because it's an immigrant story at the end of the day, and there's been tons of those of immigrants coming to the United States, and that the American dream is true or that it's not, and what are the hardships that you come as an immigrant, and it's not what you think. But this movie goes into a lot of different directions that is not at all what you think, actually. Especially the ending, which I think we should save some time
Yeah,
for at the end, because that I'm still thinking about it. I mean, I think that
yeah,
was the genius of that. But no, the whole experience I thought was just fantastic. And Brody, as annoying as his Oscar speech was, just an incredible performance.
it's
Like
amazing,
absolutely incredible. That
towering.
it really is towering. Yeah, that has kind of have to hold the movie together because of what this character goes through. And then, but you have an incredible supporting cast. I mean, Guy Pearce also just
Incredible.
phenomenal performance as this basically evil capitalist guy who sponsors him, but is actually exploiting him mentally, but then physically, surprisingly, in a scene which I thought was again shocking, but in a way that really makes you think, even though maybe beating the allegory a little bit over the head, but I'm all there for that. So yeah, I thought this movie best score of the year too, I think for me.
Hands
Incredible
down.
score, very deserving Oscar win there. So this I've only seen once in the theater, but I
Same.
definitely will be seeing this again. This is a kind of one of those movies I think that I would only try to seek out in the theater. I don't know how it would work on a smaller screen if, where you can easily kind of like check Twitter every so often or
Right.
whatever. You're not kind of locked in literally. But yeah, I thought it was great. I really liked it.
Yeah. And I think to build on what you were saying with the themes, like it is a melodrama in the sense that everything is very heightened, and Brady, in fact, uses that word himself.
Hmm.
But I think in the character development, there's a lot of nuance as well. Like this is not that, oh, I'm an immigrant and why isn't everything working out the way I wanted? And this is horrible. You do see he has a lot of baggage, right? From he's escaped horrific circumstances. He's a drug addict.
Hmm.
He has a temper for sure. There's this interesting dynamic between him and his wife.
Hmm.
So there's a lot that's going on that sort of adds a lot of depth to his character. Same goes for Guy Pearce. Like, yes, he's everything you said he is. At the same time, there's something almost sort of unpinnable about him. Like he's also carrying trauma from his childhood, the relationship with his mother or his wife, whether he's in the closet or not, who knows?
Right.
But at the same time, this kind of envy and desire that even though I have all the money and all this status and I have some appreciation of art, but I can't do what you do as an artist. And Brady's talked a lot about this, like literally consuming and owning the artist because you're so enamored by it, and there's desire but also jealousy, sexuality. There's so much going on in there, and I love that nuance, right? Because what I don't want to watch is that you're great and you're evil,
Right.
and
Right.
that's why the American dream doesn't exist. No, nothing in life is black or white. It's all in the gray of like what we bring and what we make of what's afforded to us and the cost that it comes with. There's always a cost, no matter where you're at, right? So I think the movie handles that really well. It is definitely a long movie, but for me, it felt like it flew by for the
Me
most
too.
part. I know there's a lot of dialogue about the second half not sort of living up to the first half. And I see that. I think Felicity Jones's character's entry does sort of change the entire rhythm and tempo of the movie, but I thought she was very good in it. I'm not actually a big fan of her in
Hmm.
most things that I've seen, but I thought she was really good in this movie. And typically, sort of this great man wife character is just left to the side, but I think she actually holds her own in a very interesting way. That's not just, oh, I'm going to yell at the bad guy, which she does, but there's a lot more going on, that they're a team together. They're almost sort of they're dependent in like a unhealthy way on each other, which I think is a very interesting dynamic that we haven't seen because these people have endured all this trauma, right? How could it not be the way it is? So I think there's just a lot of layers to that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think for me, the second half was necessary because that is
Yeah.
really the message of the movie was it doesn't, well, it is in a way kind of it does work out for him in terms of his success. Kind of again, we'll get to the coda in a bit, but the first half you'd see is like meteoric rise and he's getting help by this
Right.
guy and it's like, okay, well, yeah, maybe you can come to America with the talent that he has and then be able to succeed. And you see actually that success that comes at a cost, and that's the entire second half.
Right.
A cost to his marriage, a cost to his body physically, a cost. Well, actually, the art is the one thing that he ends up does do protecting, but it's not as great as it appears, and so you need that second half, I think, to be the tragic part of it. Whereas the first half, as hard as the a lot of the things he goes through is, it does sort of end on a high note of
Yeah.
okay, great, he's got the job, he's building the thing, his wife is coming back over, his family's going to be united, everything is kind of going well for him. And then obviously it has to go down, and that's why the second half maybe is a little harder to watch. But I love how that they broke that up too, because it really
Yeah.
does make you think. For I think the intermission was 20 minutes. There's like a countdown clock on the screen. I can't really recall. You're
Yeah.
just like stewing in that first half. And you have time to process it. And I remember going out into the lobby and people kind of talking about the movie, and then you go back and sit in your seat and you kind of hear
It's
what do you
great.
think about this? What do you think? Oh, what do you think's gonna happen? And what did this mean? And I love that. We can think and then you go back into the experience. It's like watching a second episode of a TV show or something. It's very different than if the whole thing was just like 3.5 hours straight through. Maybe you get a little exhausted by it. But I thought the movie
Right.
flew by, honestly. It did not feel slow or long.
No,
It
it's
moved at a
actually very
clip.
well paced.
Yeah, I definitely think so. But
Yeah.
no, I thought the second half was necessary and maybe not as enjoyable to watch as the first because of a lot of the stuff that happens. But I think a very important part of what the movie is again trying to say about the exploitation of the people that have the money but can't actually do anything, exploiting the people that actually have the talent and can produce, in this case, the art. But you can kind of use that with any type of work,
Right.
you know?
And also how the artists or the immigrants, they're sort of trapped a little bit in the system, but also in their own trappings, they're because they're dealing with all this trauma that they came with. And it's not easy, right? Do you leave this? Do you give up, or do you
Hmm.
stay? Do you pursue this? Do you not? You do have a choice out. You don't have to work with Van Buren. You can
Right,
go work with somebody else. You've gotten some checks and money leading up to this point, but now your obsession has kicked in. You're
right.
actually giving up your own salary to make somebody else's thing become better. Why are you doing that? Right. So that's what I'm talking about, nuance. Like,
Right.
yes, there's a cost, but it's also the choices you make. And I think the movie does kind of get into that, which I love because it's not, black or white. Um,
Absolutely. And speaking of ambiguity, we can jump to the coda, where it was completely shocking to me. And the whole movie sort of takes place in the 50s, early 60s,
right,
pretty much in a small period of time, and then it just leaps ahead to I think it's the early 80s with
right,
this out of nowhere coda, where I think the real sort of message of the movie. Or one of the many messages kind of lies, and I'll give you kind of my interpretation of it. And I'd love to hear yours. I don't think there really is a very clear interpretation, but to what happens at the end of the movie, his niece is giving a speech about what his art means. And giving all the, oh, this is what he meant to say with this, and this is an example of how his trauma was reflected in this archway and this thing. And he is there on stage with her at this ceremony, but he is incapacitated. He's in a wheelchair and he clearly maybe can't talk or maybe he's gone through a stroke. We don't really know, but he's not saying anything. And what I kind of interpret this is that much like the Dylan movie that we were talking about earlier, an artist can do something, but you as a person consuming the art, you bring to it whatever
right,
you want to see, or you have these feelings inside of you. And I think all the stuff that she was saying about what that art meant actually wasn't true. It was what she wanted it to mean or she thought it meant, but it was absolutely not at all what he was it trying to do with his own art because he wasn't saying anything. He was letting somebody else speak for him. So I think this is like everything she was saying was how she interpreted it and what she felt after experiencing the art, bringing her own trauma and her own life experience to it, which is what everyone does to art. You bring your own thoughts and your own life experience and your own thing and you interpret in your own way and you like, oh, this is what I think about this. This is why I like it.
right.
Someone else will say, oh, actually, no, this is what I think and this is why I like it. Or I don't like it because I thought it said this. And in a way, I think that's what this movie, at the end of it, at least for me, was trying to say is art is up to interpretation and you don't really know, or it doesn't really matter actually what the original artist intended as much as how it affected you. And then, hearing from other people's opinions of what they thought. So that was sort of what I read into the ending. What about you? What did you think?
I totally agree. As you were saying that, it struck me that the whole movie is about who owns the art and the artist. And there's a struggle between the artist and, the person who's financing it. But ultimately, once art is put out there, it belongs to neither of you.
Right,
It
right.
belongs to the public. And it just struck me that that is the crescendo of the
Hmm.
movie, is that it's about that. It's not about either of you. Now, what you do have to you is your lived experience of creating that art or paying for it. That
Right.
that's the only part you own. And so I think the expression on Brody's face is sort of that, of kind of, I don't know if he's even thinking about what this all meant or means.
Right.
I think he's just, this is my interpretation, just
Hmm.
living in his own head, his life before his eyes, that, oh, this is all that happened, how hard it was, or the fun moments of his wife, or what have you, right? Maybe that's what he's thinking about. He's not thinking about what this all means. Because for most people, when they're making art, I don't know if they know what they want to say
Hmm.
ultimately. Maybe
Right.
they know what they want to say now, but who knows what it ends up being, right? So, see, I think it's very clever. I will say it jarred me a lot in the movie with the music choice and
Oh,
how the
the
time
end.
jump happens, the end,
Yeah.
like it was
Oh,
very
yeah.
jarring
Uh-huh.
because the movie's a slow build. Again, it didn't feel slow, but it's a slow build. to suddenly jump to that with such a shift in tonality and who are these people and what have you, it was definitely jarring. But the more I think of it, I think that's the point,
Yes.
you know, that he
Oh,
wanted to do that. He wanted to kind of shake you out of everything that you witnessed, and now you're thinking about, oh, did Van Buren live or no? Did they move back to Israel or no? You're thinking about that. Boom, no, here we are, you know. So I think it's very purposeful.
absolutely. And like I left the theater that night and all I could think about was that ending. What did it mean? What was
Mm,
this? It did this thing and then I'm like, okay, trying to find out what other people thought about it. Because that was I left the theater with that, like this question of this ambiguity, but it made me think, and I think that is what great art does. It's not like a sort of you're done. Okay, great, I get this. Great, now move on to the next thing. Like the best
right.
stuff provokes this thought, and I'm still like I think there is not really a final interpretation of what that ending means. Everyone I meet that I there's like, oh, have you seen the Brutalist? I have. The first question I ask them, okay, what did you think the ending meant? Like, how did you interpret that? Because I don't think there is a right answer, and that's what's so brilliant about it.
I mean, that's the thing with the whole movie, right? Like, it's very meta. I mean, he's talked a lot about his struggles of kind of how Lux went with, you know, the financiers or whatever, messed up the whole thing. So the movie is kind of is connected to his own experience of making art, but then also saying that now that it's done, like this movie's done, it's out there. You know, you can interpret and do whatever you want to do with it. You know, and if I intellectualize it, that's sort of my only gripe with the movie is that there's so much of this meta-ness and kind of him and his partner, his wife, kind of, you know, overlaying all these themes as well as their personal experience. And it does put a little bit of that stink of like, oh, we've been through all this and we are going to make something great. So on days when I'm feeling cynical about life in general, that's where my head starts to go. Then I have to stop myself that no, I'm going to meet art where it is, right? I'm not going to go into all these narratives. And frankly, that's what hurt him the best director Oscar. Like, how does he not win an Oscar for a movie like this? And we didn't even mention under $10 million, which is insane.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So I think this is why, because I think this meta-ness and self-mythologizing of the movie and the character, but also in doing so yourself, is a bit much. It's a little amateur hour, I guess. I don't know. And that's my only thing. And from a pure art standpoint, I feel like we could have gotten rid of some of the themes. There's just too many themes in it, even though I love it, of course, you know, parsing through all of that. And, you know, I could talk about this for another hour with you, but that's my only gripe with it, you know?
Yeah, I could see that a little bit try hardness, or you're
Yeah.
a little early in your career to try to pull this stuff off, even though for me it worked like 90% was
Yeah.
kind of there versus
Same.
someone like last year's Best Picture winner, right? Oppenheimer, incredibly complicated, giant, long film, but that was a Nolan who's a master and has been
Right.
working
He's
for
been doing
20
this
years.
for,
And
yeah.
yeah, this is like the right time for him to tackle something like this, where if he tackled this right after he made Memento, Nolan, I don't think Oppenheimer would have felt as uh, effortless in terms of the genius of that film. And I think, yeah, The Brutalist feels a little bit like, okay, you're like trying to enter into this category of this amazing modern day auteur. And I think you're there. I'm very curious to see what he does next. And I'll be, right there
Yeah.
opening day now because I really did enjoy this film. But he hasn't cemented himself at that yet. I think this is saying, I'm here. I think I could do this. Either this is going to be a flash in the pan for him and this is it, or this is a signal that he's some, big new force in film. But again, I'm excited either way to see where his career goes, but I definitely can see that try hardness a little bit in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, exactly. No, I can't wait to see what he does next for sure. I mean, his next, and in a way, I'm glad that he didn't get the Oscar because, to your point,
Hmm.
like, I think it'll propel him to do something else and, frankly, sort of take a break from this experience. Like, can you even imagine? Like, this is a young director with a sidekick actor, and
Right.
now you have this giant movie that's been celebrated, talk of the town,
Hmm.
controversies, all of it. Like, just go and relax and then come back maybe in a year.
Exactly.
That's what I want to
Exactly.
say.
Yeah. Well, those were our top three movies of the year in 2024. Hopefully, listeners have seen them. If they haven't, check them out. All of it, obviously, we like these films. And I think I can say, at least, other than Nickel Boys, I liked your other two, and I think
Yeah.
you like Conclave and obviously the Brutalist too. So I think we have a lot of overlap this year, which is great. But speaking of next, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we have coming up next. So we're back now. We took a little bit of a break like we do every year. So this is our bonus episode, but now we're going to be back in 2 weeks to our regular format. So we're going to be covering the new movie Black Bag and Kate Blanchett. So we're going to go over the three movies, each of us, that to us are either our first love of Kate Blanchett, what we think is her masterpiece, and then a wild card choice. So we'll cover 6 movies in addition to Black Bag, and that episode will be out on the 19th. So folks in advance can go out and watch Black Bag in anticipation of that. And we have a lot of great things coming up this year. We'll be covering Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt and Scarlett Johansson. So there's a lot of interesting and big movies coming out over the next couple months, and we'll be with you every other week covering one of those films and discussing why that artist shaped our love of movies. So I'm very excited about this, Karan. What about you? You excited?
We have the Academy Award, high power star wattage on our show. We know where it's at.
That's right. Yeah, we're bringing the big guns in. Well, everyone, we hope you enjoyed our discussion today. And just again, another reminder to people listening on podcasts, we're actually now on video. So if you have Spotify, you can switch over to watch us and see us what we look like. Or if you don't like what we look like, you just turn that off and continue just to listen to us. Or on YouTube, if you want to go over to YouTube, we'll be posting all the video content there. And be sure to let us know in the comments what your favorite movies of 2004 were, and also what you thought of the Oscars this year. Do you agree with us? Was it a fun show, or do you have a lot of criticism and things that you didn't like about it? So again, we're available on YouTube as well as all other podcast platforms. So please subscribe if you haven't done so, because that helps customers or other people find our show. So with that, we'll see you in 2 weeks, and goodbye to you, Karan.
Goodbye to you. Although I have a lot more to say. Don't play me off in the music. Actually, just wait. I've been here before. I have a lot more to say. Sorry.